And we're starting a new Becoming a Real Life Superhero series. And as you can see up there above me, I have two wonderful ladies that are really experts in the trauma field. And we are going to be talking about how you can become a better real life hero for superheroes and survivors of childhood trauma. At the end, we're going to have a section about if you are a survivor of childhood trauma yourself, just some tips for helping you to heal. First up, we have the lovely Lukysha Sims Neal, someone I've known for several years and that I really admire and appreciate. She has a master's in childhood trauma, in trauma and disaster support. I've interviewed her previously because for a long time she's been trying to use her own past experience as a child abuse survivor of just some serious and horrible abuse, trying to use that experience to help her help others. She now works in a facility for young girls who have experienced childhood trauma and have severe mental health issues as a consequence. Our other wonderful guest, Anna, is Reverend Ayonna Johnson, who is an activist in the Killeen, Texas area, leader of the local Anderson Chapel, who also is an LPC who works with children in military setting, children in a school setting, and has a lot of experience also with child abuse survivors, especially in situations where it's really frustrating and difficult because it's difficult to figure out how to help them in the situation when people are unwilling to report, or there's just a lot of complex situations that kind of go on in that kind of dark field. And so I'm so honored to have both of these ladies with me today, and we're going to have, I think, a very good panel talking about how you can become a hero like these ladies are. They're women I look up to, and I'm very honored to have them with me today. So was that okay as far as an introduction? Anything y'all want to correct?
That's great, man.
So Keisha Ann, I read your book in the past about your childhood trauma. If you wouldn't mind, and obviously don't want to talk about anything that is too triggering for you. I know you said that you're cool no matter what, but if you want to give us a brief introduction into the child abuse that you suffered, and why and how that spurred you on to now, because not everyone ends up where you are today. A lot of people don't end up then being able to help others. They become stuck in their suffering. So if you want to talk a little bit about your suffering and then how you were able to actually use that as a weapon and a tool to help others instead of being drowned by it. If you want to take it away.
My mother's boyfriend's son, and by several other family members. That took on a life of its own. Raised in the church all my life, I just was drowning in my abuse, and I didn't know where it was coming from. I isolated a lot of times, even to the point that I wanted to commit suicide because I just didn't know how to handle what was going on with me. All the way up until the age of 16, I found myself in a situation like I didn't want to live because I could not handle what was going on with me. I had heard pray about it. I had heard fast about it. My voice was not being heard. People just in my household just did not want to believe me. And it's just so crazy because it happened at the hands of the trusted. These are people that you grew up with, you believe in, you love them unconditionally, and this is what happened. And so in order for me to get out of the spiral that I was in, I to live with my grandmother. And my grandmother, she took me up for a week. And it just didn't come from fasting and praying. Because in our community, they tell you, pray about it, she lost bear. They don't tell us medication and water. That was my way to be able to handle going through and being strong.
For those of you in the audience who are just joining us, when we're talking about abuse, childhood abuse obviously takes many forms. It can be psychological, physical, sexual. In this case, we're talking about severe physical abuse. And if you've read, is your book still available, Keisha Ann?
I took it off
I mean, it's an incredibly traumatic and very even a difficult story to read, because we're talking, like I said, abuse takes many forms. But for those of you who maybe don't know or understand exactly what we're talking about intense sexual abuse of a child. And so those of you who have also in the audience who have experienced something like this, we have ladies here who know what, obviously no one knows exactly what each person is going through, but who understand in the most severe level what, sorry, I remember reading the book and it made me very emotional, but who understand on the most severe level what you, some of what you've been going through, and understand even in the darkest of darkness. And one of the things I want to encourage you about who are listening today is that you can have been in the darkest of dark place, like Keisha Ann's talking about, where you've suffered just repeated and horrible, severe sexual abuse, and feel like you're worthless and feel like you should die, and still come out and become this, be this amazing hero for other people. And that was one of the reasons I always like having, I always share Keisha Ann's work on Twitter and other places like that, because I think that it's so important for those of you, I know there are those of you in the audience because you talk to me sometimes online, who've been in that kind of place, to understand that it's not really over for you. There's always hope. Reverend Ayonna, would you mind introducing, you don't have to talk about we haven't agreed on talking about any past life or anything like that, but would you mind talking a little bit about how you got into the LPC game, the counseling game, and what kind of drove you?
Problems. I was a peer counselor in high school. I was a peer counselor in college, but I went to college for graphic design and marketing. And then when God called me into the ministry, I was like, I need something else other than ministry for my master's. And so God was like, look, you've been doing this all your life. Then I could do a dual program with my master's of divinity and clinical counseling, get a master's in clinical counseling. So I combined them two. I always loved people. In fact, when I didn't have any childhood abuse and trauma, but when I was in my freshman to sophomore year, in between the summer, coming out of my freshman year of college, I got raped. I was at a party. I was at a friend's house. Someone that I knew. We had been drinking. It was just girls at that time, and then guys came over. Wasn't expecting the guys to come over, but they came over. And of course, everybody was paired up. I wasn't paired up. I wasn't expecting to be paired up. But somehow, some way, I got paired up. And that was actually the first time I've ever had intercourse. So I remember waking up, getting off of the bathroom floor and cleaning up my own blood. And my father was in ministry. I kept it to myself. I told my friends, who told me, oh, you'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Right. And so, what you talked about, from the whole stigma of the church,
Right.
and keeping things, although my parents would have clearly, if they knew, they would have done something. But because my mother taught me by just showing me, not telling me, of protecting my father, who was a minister, I felt that me, by not telling what happened to me, was also me protecting my dad.
Right.
And so I didn't say anything. And so that just gave although I was a high functioning student, I still got A's and B's, but I was promiscuous. I was doing some things that I should not have done. I was drinking. And so for, those who are out there, on the outside looking in, it may seem as if everything is okay. It may seem as if, they're fine. They're maintaining everything that they're doing. They're being successful, when truly on the flip side of it, they're crying and scratching to get out and needing the help that they need. So I'm a very different person. I'm different in the way that I approach my own healing. I had to tell my parents that was part of my healing, to let them know, because I didn't want to keep that secret. And part of me being a peer counselor in college, there was a play that the counselors put out called Drawing the Shades, and it was about abuse awareness, sexual abuse awareness on campus. And it was a play, and they asked for people to volunteer who wanted to be part of this play. Well, I volunteered to be a part of this play and to play a victim. And so
Wow.
although I was acting out, so to them, what was happening to this true story of a person that happened on campus, I was literally, they did not know that I was telling my story while I was being somebody else. And that outlet for me helped me.
Mm.
And so from life and things that have happened from there, and I just thank God for my own journey, just realizing that we can't hold all of this stuff in, because we end up bleeding on other people, because it affects our perspective on life. It
Mm.
affects when people do come to us for help. If we can't get past our own stuff, I can't help lead anybody to
That's true.
theirs. And
Yeah.
so, and then just with ministry, and then just being able to talk about it a lot, getting things out, it helped me a lot. And so, I've come to love my ministry is women. I love women in ministry. I'm always gravitating, and I can identify when I see pain in somebody's eyes. And so being able to kind of come to them and see what's going on has just been great.
Absolutely. You brought up two points that I think good for us all to discuss, just from actually really a medical perspective. As a sexual assault medical forensic examiner, one of the things that we learn is that a lot of times, as a result, because the sexual mechanism, the sexual organism,
Mhm.
is significantly affected by, like you've both touched on, having your first sexual encounter be a unwanted and violent and horrible situation, and of course that affects all of somebody's life. So there are some survivors who become very, like you talked about, who become more promiscuous and engage in unsafe, further endangering themselves with unsafe sexual practices because they're hurting inside. And there's others, which I think is something that was also in the book as well, who feel withdrawn and don't want to be touched ever, just can't handle being touched. And so every person has a different reaction to these situations. And one of the problems with our society in a lot of ways is it tends to normalize what is actually behavior that's in pain, like a lot of, for example, unsafe sexual practices that really come from somebody being in pain and trying to survive. And our society, rather than looking at medical fact, tends to go in that direction. So I think it's always valuable when somebody brings up that behavioral change. Actually, Keisha Ann, since we were talking about behavioral change, you had, before we got on, talked a little bit about some of the very aggressive behavioral changes, not sexually but otherwise, in some of the young girls that you work with. Is that, would you mind touching on that for us again for the audience?
Absolutely. A lot of the girls that I deal with on a regular basis, they're very aggressive. They're very angry. They're bitter. They're mad. They want to lash out, and a lot of times when they lash out, what that looks like, they want to throw chairs. They want to cut themselves. They want to see the blood. They say when they do it, it helps them to release some type of pain. Um, they want to break windows. They want to break glass. They want to elope. Some of them just want to be held. They want someone to squeeze them to let them know that it's going to be okay. I mean, they act out in so many different behaviors. They scream, they holler, they cry, um, but they want to be heard. They want to be heard. That is the number one thing that I always get when I'm processing with a girl. They want to be heard. They don't want to be ignored. That is the main thing, is listening.
Absolutely. And like, Reverend Ayonna touched on, like in some experiences you have this desire, you end up silencing yourself out of fear because of what you've seen modeled around you, and other times, like you're talking about, people will silence you like externally, directly, and say I don't believe you, or so forth, and other things like that. And so whether an internal or an external silencing, that affects how you behave and how you interact with the world around you. One of the big issues in sexual assault medicine today, this is including adults, specifically, since most of my experience is with adults, or long time ago childhood survivors, like they were children but they're now adults, which is why I want to have experts like you all on. But one of the problems in sexual assault medicine today is people say, okay, if her story changes or his story changes a lot, then it's another way to silence them, to say, then it's not true. But one problem is when you look at the neurobiology of the brain during trauma, when these things are experienced, and I'm sure that you both maybe have some aspect of this in your own life that you've experienced, that like certain parts of it become very, very clear, or certain parts you can't remember at all. Because when something traumatic is happening, the body, to protect itself, has violent surges of adrenaline. The cortisol system changes completely in the body. You end up having violent surges as well, especially with the very uncomfortable and horrible aspect of something like unwanted orgasm or things like that. Oxytocin as well. So all of these complex neurobiological changes directly affect the hippocampus, where memory is stored. And a lot of that plays into, obviously, things like PTSD and other things like that. But even somebody who doesn't have PTSD, who has the trauma experience, may have moments where, like, they might be talking to an investigator and they can't remember a thing, but then a week later they remember a thing. And so the trouble is, our current investigative system is geared to recognizing lies via very unscientific method, via, I can tell because they looked around, or I can tell because the story is changed. But that's actually not a very scientific way to find out the truth. Really, it's very difficult to find out the truth, and it usually involves things like DNA, sexual forensic exams, and other things like that, which sometimes aren't even available to the patient, especially if it was a child who is now telling their story 5 or 10 years later. Then that evidence is not available to you. So it puts the whole system in a very difficult situation. And so working, I love the emphasis on listening to the person, because regardless of what you know or don't know about the situation as an outsider, listening gives the person an opportunity in some ways to go through a mild form of exposure therapy. I thought it was phenomenal what you mentioned, Reverend Ayonna, about just this going through, and we actually consider young college students to be children in a lot of adolescent medicine, with the upper limits of pediatrics. But as a young woman at that point, going through the play, for example, to act it out, is actually similar to some of the exposure therapy that is done for PTSD, like WET and other things like that, WET, written exposure therapy, where you tell out your story. And I imagine that for you, Keisha Ann, writing out your story was in some ways a part of that. You're exposing yourself to this horrible thing again, but you're getting it out. And so understanding that by listening to somebody, you really are helping them in some ways to process sometimes. From both of you, I'd love to hear, what are some other strong ways that folks can help somebody we'll break this into 2 parts. First, what are some ways that you can help immediately to identify and get someone out of a bad child abuse situation, like you talked about how your grandmother helped you out? What are some immediate ways and aggressively practical ways to help out? And then when somebody is a survivor of childhood trauma, and they might be a child or an adult, what are some ways that you can help them heal emotionally?
You want to go first? Well, first thing, if they're coming to you, and the child does not feel safe in the house, if you have no way to get them out, then definitely you need to report it regardless. And then if you may need to get some cops to come with you to the house, then you need to go do that. If you feel personally that you are just not capable of talking to this person, you can still be a hero by referring them to people who can help them. Just because you yourself aren't able or feel equipped or maybe even feel uncomfortable, don't even feel ashamed that you feel uncomfortable to help them or know how to at least address them and point them in the right direction, even if it's just the police. Calling the police, finding a resource for them to give to them is very helpful. What I find out with a lot of kids, especially in middle school, is that when they're cutting, when they're having issues, the kid themselves does not come to us.
No.
It's a lot of times it's their friend who does not know how to deal with this massive information that they were just given, because in their mind and their perception, they're babies. They cannot help them according to how they feel that they feel bad that they can't help them. And we tell them all the time, you are helping them now by telling us. Now I can tell somebody else who can get the right people in place to truly give help to the person who's there. And again, like Sis said, just listen, sit there, listen to them. They're going to give you all the information they want to give you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't even need to dig. They just want to know if somebody's just listening, is going to sit and listen enough for them to fully tell their side of the story. Because a lot of times I found there was one child, one case in my school where the relationship between her and stepdad was romanticized by stepdad. So it was more so, he loves me, he cares for me, he doesn't mean to hurt me. And the so mother has chosen the spouse over the child. So now the child is at an adoption agency. She's in a facility, in a home. And even sometimes in talking with her now, she didn't want to go to court. She was like, I feel as if it's my fault because now the soldier gets dishonorable discharge, and trying to explain to her, it's not your fault. You didn't make him do. And so just listening, because a lot of times people will feel as if I did something to coerce it. I should not have done, I should have not been, I did it. I shouldn't have been in that place. I shouldn't have been.
They start to blame themselves.
I shouldn't have been, I should have known. My dad called me several times, talking about be wise, be wise. I was not wise. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. But know that it is not, letting them know it's not their fault.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sis, you got any more?
No, you are.
Okay.
You covered it all. That's true. A cutter that's cutting is not going to tell off on themselves. It's usually a friend that's going to tell. But no, you covered absolutely everything that I would have said. It's truth.
When somebody is trying to heal, what about, and I'll let you take the lead on this question, Keisha Ann, what about like long term when you're trying to help somebody heal? Reverend Ayonna kind of focused on the first part of that question, like how do you get in and deal with that situation acutely? But what about somebody who, because you mentioned having trouble, 5, 10, 15 years after the incidents had ended, how do you then help somebody in that situation long term What are some of the things that, which that's all my soldiers, especially my male assault victims, that's their story, is it's like they haven't told anyone for 5, 10, 15 years, and here they are, and it's affecting their job performance, it's affecting their life. How do you find, both as a survivor yourself, and as someone who tries to help out survivors, how do you find long-term, what are ways that someone can come alongside and help out?
I'll tell you about me, what works on me. I have been healing because of the kids that I deal with, because of their pain. I'm healing their pain. I have to be real. Every day that I go into my job and I am witnessing different things that the girls tell me, things that they say, things that I see through my eyes and processing with them, I'm healing through their trauma. And that gets me through the day. Even hearing them describe their situations, saying that they have PTSD, saying that they have anxiety, and they've been needing their medication, I'm actually been healing through them. Also, I talk about it. Days that I have triggers, I talk about it. Like, even to this day, I always verbalize, because you got to verbalize your boundaries. I don't like people right behind me.
Yes.
And I always tell, no matter who it is, do not come behind me, because in my mind, I'm going to feel like you're trying to attack me. It's just something that's there. So you got to make sure you articulate your boundaries. You got to make sure that you constantly reset yourself. You got to constantly tell yourself, it's okay, you're in your safe space. Create a safe space for you. You got to always create a safe space. Always verbalize how you feel, whether or not it's through your voice or through writing. Like, I'm constantly writing. I call it my own writing therapy. So that's how I get through my healing. And every day it gets better. I'm not where I used to be. The little girl in me, she actually grew up 5, 6 years ago. So God be the glory for that. So that's
Amen.
how I help somebody else.
Yeah. I think it's amazing what you say too when you talk about healing by helping other people, because I think that's something that's not touched on very much in therapeutic circles, and it's something that is kind of so logotherapy is one of my favorite things that all of you who are in the audience know. I share this very frequently. Dr. Viktor Frankl was a concentration camp survivor back during World War II, and he wrote his thesis on logotherapy, which was very different from the way that Freudian theory had altered and affected, unfortunately, permanently affected psychology. And one of the big themes in logotherapy, because quite frankly, people like Freud didn't know anything. Freud had like 12 patients that he had written to, and that's it, and that's where a lot of the stuff came up with. That was not very scientific. But, people like Dr. Frankl, like actual survivors, and this is why we need stories from survivors of trauma, like yourselves, and of course, that's a different kind of trauma that he went through, but we need people who are survivors to be working in these fields, because it helps the rest of us to get a more true scientific perspective. And one of the big things he brought up was logotherapy, the idea that if you have a reason, then you can suffer almost anything. The suffering itself, the inner suffering that a person has, does not have to lead to mental illness or collapse. If there's something to strengthen you through it, and that's something being a purpose, and helping other people is such a powerful purpose, that in our modern, unfortunately, it's really like white girl psychology, I gotta take care of myself, eat, pray, love, like that form of psychology. I'm sorry if that was rude, but that form of psychology being incredibly very self-focused, very self-centered, is actually harmful to that person in the center. Always thinking about me, not understanding that, yes, you got to think about you, because that's a problem that survivors have, is they don't think about them. They think about, I got to protect this other person, or protect this thing. But actually, the paradox is that as you start to take care of people like you, you help bring yourself out. Not trying to take care of the perpetrator, not trying to take care of some unrelated person, not trying to take care of the person who did it or someone else's reputation, but taking care of people like you who have suffered what you have suffered as a form of healing. Basically taking care of people within your lane, within your field of expertise, because it's not your lane or your field of expertise to take care of someone who assaulted you. That is a totally different field of psychology and not your lane. But as you're taking care of people like you heal, and in that way and it's awesome to hear you talk about it, because it's really like you are taking the suffering that life dealt you, and someone said, this was I think on a cartoon, but somebody said, well, real people, when life gives them lemons, they squeeze it back into life's face and spit in his eyes. In some ways, that's what you're doing. You have a bad experience that's been given to you, you give it right back to life and say, I'm still going to triumph and be a triumphant person because of what you did. As I call it healthy revenge in some ways. You're coming back around and you are making this enormous impact, and in some ways that's revenge on the world for what happened to you. So I would encourage people in the audience listening to kind of think about that. Think about, instead of the like, okay, I need to, and this is very difficult, but instead of it actually helps to get you out of the isolation when you think, okay, what's my purpose? What's my goal? How am I going to use this and fight back against this, against what happened to me, and what am I going to do? And it's a much more difficult, but also a much more complex, deep, and real, and healthy psychology than the just, I need a spa day kind of mentality that I think some people unfortunately is being I have gone to like 14 or 15 different therapists in my own mental health care, and I can tell you sometimes it's not very scientific what people come up with. So there are two questions. Jump in, please.
And that's why it is also good for groups, because you see that in groups where there will be a few that come out, and first of all, I'm amongst individuals who may not know my exact situation, but they know my similar situation, and they get me, they get how I feel. But you will see people within groups become that therapist to others and helping them out of what just happened, even when they have a setback themselves. Then you'll end up seeing somebody else in the group help them, and they are celebrating together and they're rejoicing together over this one person who, she finally gets it. She finally told her full story. She finally walked to the corner. Thank God she got out the house. So you what you're talking about, you see a lot in group settings for anything. It could be AA, it could be whatever it is, but definitely when you're dealing with abuse and trauma, grief, whatever, you see that. And so if you are struggling with it, because sometimes honestly one-on-one counseling just is not gonna work. It's not gonna help me. This one-on-one, you talking to me, telling me, I need you to open up and, tell me what happened. And, you can, this is a safe place. Okay, that's fine. I'm still not telling you my stuff.
Yeah.
Because I don't trust you. But if I can see somebody else who looks like me, if I can hear somebody else, feel comfortable with them opening up, then okay, maybe I can consider opening up too. And so I always find groups a lot more helpful than the individual when it comes to those intense traumatic experiences.
That's fascinating. And so I think that's very challenging, because a lot of people don't have so much shame about it. There are people who are very introverted and don't want to talk about something in a group, or they feel like they're ashamed that, there are people who minimize their own pain. They might look at somebody else and say, well, all their trauma is serious and mine is not as serious, and therefore I can't talk. But I mean, you really emphasize like the power of these therapeutic processes that happen when people allow themselves to be surrounded by other people. I mean, we are herd animals, community animals, and it does make a big difference. So obviously everything is a little bit different for each person, but that's such a powerful thing. There were actually 2 questions for both of you from the audience. I might have, let me know, folks, if I've missed any others. The first one, don't say your fingers are fat. Your fingers are not fat. The first one was about reconnecting with people, and I thought that was a good one because of what you just brought up, because of the healing power of reconnecting, something like a group, being able to kind of bring that out of people. What about somebody, this is specifically somebody who's talking about, well, what about in the case of neglect, where they feel now very isolated from other people, and don't really feel like they can make any kind of connections with other people. What kind of suggestions would you both give to somebody like that who just can't come back in and connect, whether in a group therapy setting or a relationship setting, any other setting? They just feel like they're separated between like a glass wall, and they can't get in there. What recommendations would you both have for share your perspective?
Wow. Well, that's a hard one. Usually, when we have girls who isolate themselves, usually we try to like offer them like sensory toys to kind of help them to be able to feel with textures, and we try to like certain foods that help with the sensory issues too, with touch, taste, and smell. Sometimes certain triggers with flashbacks and everything. So introducing certain sensory items could also be a way to help with the isolation.
Absolutely. What about for adults? What about for older people who've experienced this before? They had this experience as children, and now they feel like it permanently scars their relationships, or like their ability to, like you were talking about, Reverend Ayonna, opening up in some kind of group setting or other things like that, where like they avoid groups like the plague. They can't talk to people, even in a close relationship. They can't have a close relationship with another human being. I'd never heard that, and I love what you talked about, Lukysha, about using sensory things to help a child come back out. Do you think, either of you, that there are ways in which somebody could use that as an adult for themselves to try to help them connect, or what other techniques do you recommend for somebody to try to reconnect with other people?
Definitely. A lot of times I would always work backwards sometimes with individuals. So if this was the perfect world, or, what is the end result of this? What is that going to look like? What is your ultimate relationship with so-and-so? What do you want that to be? Okay. And so if that's your end result picture, let's work backwards to kind of get you forward. And having them to understand that it's okay to take a risk, and knowing that sometimes taking a risk, it may not come out the way that you actually want it to come out, and that still is okay. Because when you're dealing with trauma, a lot of times I need a definite, like, this gonna work, this not gonna work, or it's either gonna hurt me, I ain't gonna do it. And so letting them know that, those definites actually keep you from accomplishing what you ultimately want to accomplish. I saw this on Netflix. It's a dating thing. It's called Love is Blind. I don't know if anybody has seen it, but it's called Love is Blind. And these 2 individuals meet each other in 2 pods. They don't see each other. They hear each other, and they begin to connect. The love for them connects through just talking. So the guy proposes without even seeing them, and then they see each other for the first time, and they see if they're going to make it work. I think a lot of times too, such as the sensory things, of having something that I can be together, but if I had a wall in between, can they talk to me? So I feel isolated, but I'm not isolated. I can still talk to somebody, but I don't have to worry about contact. I don't have to worry about what my hands are doing, what my eyes are doing. I don't have to worry about being judged of what I'm doing in my space. But because sometimes I can talk to somebody a whole lot easier without seeing them than I can, face to face. Just put up a sheet. Let's have a conversation.
That's such an awesome thing to say too, because I find, and this is, I don't have any childhood trauma. I am currently aggressively being treated for PTSD, and they're talking about, which actually I need to tell you, the audience, this. If I disappear for a month and nothing happened to me, they're talking about hospitalizing me again. But what you said, like, is so applicable to all forms of, like isolationist trauma, where it's like, I struggle so hard to go outside of the house. I struggle so hard to see people. But when I'm on camera, I feel I can be bubbly, I can be myself, I can be open. When I'm having conversations with somebody like this there's a wall here, there's no one sitting right here, it is a camera, but I feel like I can connect with the both of you and with the audience. And so the fact that you would bring that up for something much more severe, like childhood trauma, or dealing with like lifelong chronic PTSD, I think it's just so fascinating, because I think it can be that principle can be used in almost all contexts. The principle of, okay, so maybe we can't, like you said, like maybe we can't walk to the corner of the street yet, but maybe we can communicate and connect with people through other ways. Exactly.
Visualization is really helpful as well, in a trauma, because sometimes even in visualization, I can have heart palpitations, because just visualizing it causes anxiety.
Yep.
And so if we can just work through just visualizing it and practice visualizing it to a point where I become comfortable. Okay, now let's talk about actually taking some baby steps. Doing it, see if it happens.
Absolutely. Reframing the story. And that actually goes into another viewer question that we have, which is, they said, what is writing therapy? Which means they have not watched the video on evidence-based journaling or the video on PTSD and writing exposure therapy. Shame. I'm kidding, Modus, you're fine. But they're asking, what is writing therapy, and what kind of things do you write about? And that leads into the same thing, the visualization moving into exposure therapy. And Keisha Ann, if you want to take this one, how go ahead.
Absolutely. What writing therapy, actually, it started out me journaling at the age of probably 12, 13. I started writing, and I didn't know my writing was eventually going to help me. So when I started writing, it turned into me doing the book. And when I did the book, and I start going back and I start reading the book, I realized everything that I was writing to tell a story, and I was releasing. And so I end up after that, long story short, I noticed that I was onto something, and it was helping other people. So I started like writing little things. I call it pen and paper. I do that all the time on Facebook, and also I'm a blogger. So it's me writing out loud my thoughts about how I feel for the day. But I'm writing it out loud because maybe somebody else is feeling the same way. Or I may write it out loud because maybe I'm trying to do something thought-provoking. So I call it writing therapy as a way to get it out as a form of expression.
I love that. We lost Dr. Ayonna. Reverend Ayonna. I don't know what happened. But Modus, did you hear that? Did that answer your question? I know I was typing to you at the same time, just so you know that I wasn't trying to tease you. But did you kind of let me know, Modus, in the chat if that made sense or didn't make sense? Wow, this thing is timing us out. Did it kick her off? because it says your call in 10 minutes. We might have to start a second call. the Google didn't like that. But yeah, so you kind of get that starting talking about the experience, and again moving forward from that. There's if you do end up seeing the journaling video on the Real Doctor Adventures ASMR channel, journaling. There was one study where they did, this was specifically for anxiety, not a trauma disorder, but it's a similar conclusion that you can draw. They tested between somebody who just wrote random stuff versus somebody, there you go, you're back. I was worried Google had kicked you off, because Google's going to kick us all off in 10 minutes.
No.
There was, so in the study, what they did is they split between people who just wrote whatever, and then people who wrote, like you're talking about, Keisha Ann, about their experience, and then people who wrote about their experience and about solutions for it, which is something that I see you do on your blog as well. So, and they found that of the three group categories, people who did the third thing, who wrote about their experience but then also answered their own experience in these thoughts are, this thought is maybe needs to be changed in this way. It's not that I'm the bad guy, it's that he's the bad guy. Changing your thoughts and answering your experience as you walk through. And sorry to say, I know there are female abusers as well. Just the vast majority of the ones of my patients have been male. So like answering that, and that worked really well for anxiety disorders. The second best was just writing your own, and then the least effective but still helpful was just writing stream of consciousness. So that's why I always really, really push you viewers to use the handouts that are in the depression playlist and the Real Doctor Adventures ASMR channel, because they help you get started. They help you answer questions and find places, specifically with CBT and DBT, both cognitive and dialectical behavioral therapy. If you are able to identify thinking patterns or feelings that are harming you, this is again why like a therapy is useful. Like Keisha Ann said at the beginning, God, medication, and a therapy, which I think is a beautiful triumvirate. I think that, yes, I love how you put that all together, because you need that it helps to have another person who can help you tweak the ways in which the thought patterns that have been forced on you are hurting you. And so, if you don't have access to that, writing is so powerful, because you can in some ways help yourself with that. Any additional comments on how to, from either of you, on ways, on ways to heal and ways to help others heal?
Like I said, never think that you are the hero, that you have to do it by yourself. You can always help somebody by speaking up for them. You can help yourself by speaking up for yourself. You got to come out of the dark someday. And ultimately, even though we fight it, we all still want to be loved. We all still want to hug. And we all want to heal. But a lot of times we're too afraid to heal, because we don't want to relive the pain. And we all know that if I get a scratch, if I don't apply the right ointment, although it may sting, it's not going to heal. So I have to address it with something. And so it's the same thing for our emotional trauma and things that we go through, that in order to heal from it, we got to heal through it, which means we have to address it. But know that there are people who are skilled, who can help you in guiding through that. And so all you need to do is just take one step and make a phone call. You can, if you don't want to go to a facility, you can try something that is online, online counseling. Talk to somebody, trusted person who can get it out, someone who's going to listen, and someone who's going to have your best interest at heart.
That's true.
And folks, as you know, it also shows up in the chat, but your local health department may have those resources if you can't afford therapy. Otherwise, you know that through this channel, you can get 10% off therapy at betterhelp.com/Dr. Jen. That's obviously an affiliate link. But what's important is not that you use like a link or that supports the channel. What matters is that you use something that supports you. So if your health department can get you care for free, go for it. If you don't qualify for that, you can get online therapy, like I said, through my link to get you cheaper care. And there's other options as well. Sometimes your local church will have options, and that can be a very powerful solution as well. And the crisis text line is always in the description of every video on the depression playlist. So definitely hit that out. Keisha Ann, you want to close this out also with any other words? And please also, both of you, please tell us where they can find your stuff as well.
Stuff. Well, I do believe you have a book out, right? Don't you have a book? I think I saw it on social media.
I do. I have a number of books. She does. She does. That's right. She just you just put one out. We're talking about you, Ayonna, right?
Oh, yes, I have a children's book.
Okay.
Don't you have books too?
I do, but they're not relevant to they're fiction and not, which actually, I want
a children's book.
My people know where to, they know where to find me. But I want, before Google kicks us off, I want them to know where they can find you.
You can listen. Simply listen. I really encourage that. You can find me on Twitter at Listen to My Heart. Listen, the number 2 to my heart 7. Or Lukysha Sims Neal. I'm on Facebook as Keisha Ann. I do have a blog site. I believe it's Live Your Best Days blogspot.com, I think. Something like that.
I'm putting it in the chat here for people too. And both of those places are very good her blog is beautiful. Very good place to hear more about health, mental health, and especially from a survivor's perspective. I always try to offer you guys resources that I may not have expertise in to get you the help you need. And then Reverend Ayonna, you live stream like every week as well. Where can people find that and find you?
So I'm live streaming. We'll be starting back up on Thursday. I do women's Bible study, but I do it a little differently. I take movies and we go through movies and I pull out biblical and moral principles. We talk, we have fun. This upcoming Thursday, we're starting the Single Moms Club by Tyler Perry, that movie. And so I'm excited about it. I am on Facebook, Ayonna Johnson, Yona Johnson. You may see my face at Ayonna D Johnson. Don't do that one. Somebody hacked my page. Don't go on there.
It's terrible.
So do the one that starts with a Y, Yona Johnson. Also, if you're looking, I have a children's book. It's called What If God Is in My Pocket? It's about a little boy who visualizing powers that he would have if God was physically in his pocket, and then comes to the realization of what that truly means. That book you can find on Amazon, but also through my website, Merging Graphics, MERGINGRAPHICS.com, Merging Graphics.
I am having trouble getting it to load. Is it emerging or merging?
Merging, MER.
There we go. I got you. And I'll paste that in.
MER.
There we go. Thank you both very much. And I love that ending thing that Keisha said about listen. That's the number one thing you can do if you want to help other people. We have so I wanted to just make sure we got that important stuff out before everything closes off. I thank you both, ladies. You are about to be kicked by Google. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. And that was wonderful. I'm going to email both of them real quick. And Modus, I saw your question. And actually, I find that, like Ayonna was talking about, a great first step. I saw your last question there. about like, can it be fiction? So I haven't seen any studies on fiction writing. However, I can tell you that a lot of people will use, a lot of survivors will use like fiction as a way to do that first step and help with that visualization, so you can write. And this is not just for child abuse, but for things like PTSD. Even like I myself, I will use the fiction in some ways to do the same thing like we were talking about earlier, like to get revenge on the bad situation. So, you know, whatever you write, and get it out there. The most effective writing to help you study-wise is going to be if you write out what you what happened, what's going on, and then you answer that. That's by far the most effective, which is the least fun. I hate that. It's not a fun kind of writing. But take your baby steps. Start in, like I said in the study, you know, you can start here with the writing whatever. Start with your writing whatever, because at least it gets your feelings out and you feel listened to by yourself, which is very important. As she's talking about listening to yourself is a part of that. So yeah, hit them up to ask them those further questions on both of those websites, any further questions you had.